Peter. I will take the apologies and any declarations, and I've got a couple of comments I would want to make before we move into the meeting proper. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Convener, we have apologies submitted from Michael Rollo, from Charlotte Larkin, parent representative, and from Joel Snedden, pupil representative.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kerr.
Councillor Bundy.
Right, thank you. I just want to firstly acknowledge that recently, following the announcement from the Scottish Government, the authority has won the bid for £23 million, a leap bid to increase the capacity around Carngrange School to make it multi-campus, and we really see that's a really exciting opportunity for the service in developing that ASM programme going forward and giving a good quality learning environment. So that will be a really good project to be taken forward. You'll also be very aware from the recent press release that Robert Naylor, the Director of Children's Services, has retired. And I won't say too much just now, as there will be a special full council before the end of November, and that will give people opportunities to say their tributes at that point. But wanted to acknowledge from this committee, thank him for all the work that he's done over the years for the service, particularly acknowledging the fact that we've reached the best of our attainment. And I think that's been tribute to his leadership as well as the leadership team. We do, however, have Mr Greenhorn with us, and this is Mr Greenhorn's last committee, Education, Children and Young People's Committee, and I wouldn't want it to pass without acknowledging the work that he's done, having joined the authority in 2003. Firstly, he was in the finance team. He then moved over to education and became the custodian of all things finance within education and children's services. Over the years, he has done a fantastic job, and I think this is probably the first meeting that we don't have an early years expansion update. We've lived that for the last 5 years, but managing that particular programme and the rollout of it, particularly the new builds, Gary has kept us on track and indeed helps us deliver it on time, and so good. A tribute to him for doing that. Gary's also been involved over the years in the new build schools, such as Denny, Falkirk High, St Mungo's, St Bernadette's. I think there's one I've missed. Kinnaird, and Madison. So he has led in all of those projects around that, the design and the finance team. Also helped deliver as part of the team in the Connected Falkirk, which was significant to this authority, and that we were rolled that out just before COVID came along, and I do believe that has a significant impact on us being continuing the attainment levels that we have there. So Gary, I really do want to wish you the very best of luck in your retirement. I know you've got lots of exciting things planned, but just want to thank you for all the work and the contribution to the service over the years.
Thanks very much, Convener, it's appreciated. And thanks to all the members of the exec, because it's made my job easier to get the support from our teams, from you, both past and present, and it really is appreciated from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Gary won't be disappearing until near the end of the year, so you will get the opportunity to speak to him personally, I'm sure. But I just wanted to say that we will miss Gary, very robust reports. You knew I couldn't get away without making comment there. Oh. Okay, thank you, folks. We'll now move into, are there any declarations of interest in any items on the agenda this morning? No. If we can go to the minute of the meeting of the 12th of September, can we approve that as a true record? are there any matters arising that MD would wish any feedback on in relation to the minute? No. Okay, thank you. Item 4 is the rolling action log, and we have that before us. And I'll go to Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Convener. And as usual, the rolling action log records those decisions of the committee where it's called for a further report. And it just gives an update on when those reports are due and what the progress is in supplying those reports to the executive. And where there is a date that hasn't been able to be met, there are an explanation provided in the comments column. The rolling action log is for information only, but it is available for members to ask questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Councillor Spears?
Thank you. Page 12. I've got my glasses on. 620. Consultation on the proposed mothballing of Blackness Primary School. I think we've been through this debate, and I know that the Parent Council and the local elected member, Councillor Anne Ritchie, is greatly concerned that this has come back because the school roll is much higher and there is, pardon me, a lot more kids ready to enrol. So they're very concerned that this has come back and caused a great deal of mental stress, not just for the parents, but for the whole community, because the school is really central to one of our most rural of communities. And they wonder why this has come back when the school roll will be expanded.
Okay, I'll go to Mr. Moody on the recording of the minute of the meeting.
Yes, thank you, Convener. And I think, as I stated earlier, the purpose of the rolling action log is to record the previous decisions of this executive. And it was a decision of the executive on the 31st of January 2023 that there be an update report brought back to the executive in March 2024. So that's the only reason why it's on the rolling action log.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on the rolling action log? No, thank you. Moving on to item 5, and it is the Education, Children and Young People's Executive Membership. And we are welcoming our care experienced young person this morning. So I'll go to Mr. Moody.
Thank you very much, Convener. And this is a formal report to asking the executive to appoint Gemma Ferry as the care experienced young person on the executive. And Gemma, as you'll see, has been nominated by the CHAMPS board. So it's simply the formal decision which is asked of you today.
Okay, thank you. I'm very delighted that Gemma's put herself forward, and more than happy to move the report and welcome her to the committee. We'll wait till it's formally seconded, and I know that Gemma wants to say a few words.
First off, thank you so much. I'm really happy to be back here since the motion in June, and I'm really happy to have been picked for this post. But I do have a couple of questions from the CHAMPS board that they've asked me to bring today. The first one being, as we have a couple of CHAMPS who are learning note taking at the minute, and all of the CHAMPS board are interested in this meeting, would it be possible if them and our staff come be an audience to the room of the meeting, as it would be great for them to learn note taking in an environment like this, and also just out of their own interest, it'd be lovely if they were here.
This is a public meeting, Gemma, and anyone is welcome. We do have a public gallery, nobody there today, but they'd be very welcome to come and sit in, and I'm sure some of our committee staff would be able to give a wee bit of support and guidance around the note taking and the understanding of the processes that are going on.
Great. Thank you, Convener. And my second question the CHAMPS have asked me to bring today, should I not be able to attend for one reason or another, like I've got community council business that I can't get out of, but the CHAMPS have asked, in a scenario like that where I can't attend any meeting, that that someone else come and sit in the seat on my behalf at that point in time for that meeting.
Okay, thank you, Gemma. I'll go to Mr. Moody on that one for a response.
Yes, thanks, convener. No, that isn't something that would be able to happen under our current arrangements. We don't have a facility for substitute members on our committees. There is, however, a current review of standing orders underway. It's always something we can add on to our consideration.
Thank you.
It would then, however, be open to any member of the Champs to come and sit in the public gallery and hear what goes on in the meeting, and that would allow them to be able to report back directly. And of course, there is obviously online access as well.
Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Colley.
Yeah, just to formally second and very much welcome you joining the committee.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you. I just want to say how very fortunate we are to have Miss Ferry as our representative. Gemma's work and advocating for the experience of care experienced individuals has been invaluable. We've seen it locally and also nationally. So I'm just really delighted that she's bringing her expertise to help guide us in our decision-making process at Falkirk Council. So I just want to say how absolutely delighted I am to have her joining the team.
Thank you for that. Okay, if we can move on to our next item, and item 6 is a National Allowance for Children in Kinship and Foster Care, and I'll move across to Mrs. Lacey.
Thank you, convener, and good morning to everybody. This report informs Education, Children and Young People Executive of the new National Allowance for Eligible Kinship and Foster Carers, which was agreed by the COSLA Leaders Group on the 25th of August this year. In order to ensure that our foster and kinship carers benefited from this payment as soon as possible, the service has already made arrangements to apply the new allowance rates and to process the backdated pay. The recommendations are noted at section 2, and committee is asked to note that additional funding from Scottish Government is being made available, which is sufficient to cover the additional costs. And on this basis, note that Falkirk's implementation of the new Scottish Recommended Allowance for Eligible Kinship and Foster Carers, and to agree that Falkirk aligns the local age ranges with the nationally applied ranges within the Scottish Recommended Allowance, effectively combining the 5 to 10 age and the 11 to 15 age ranges into one standard age bracket. Background information is contained in section 4. Of particular note, there has typically been variation across the country regarding the amount of allowance that's paid to carers. The introduction of the Scottish Recommended Allowance provides a recommended allowance that all local authorities must pay as a minimum, although they can choose to pay more. The minimum level will be kept under review at a national level. Where local authorities are already paying above the national minimum allowance, it is expected that this will continue, so that eligible kinship and foster carers currently in receipt of that allowance will not be worse off because of the new commitment. So this is the case with one age band already applied in Falkirk. We pay more currently in one age band, and we will continue to do so until there is either a change nationally or locally in the amounts applied. Both kinship and foster carers receive other payments throughout the year, and these are outlined at Appendix 1. Foster carers also receive weekly fees which reflect their experience and skills. Our kinship and foster carers are affected by the cost of living crisis alongside everyone else, and this year Falkirk Council provided a 5% uplift in fees to help mitigate some of the impact that was applied earlier this year before we were aware of the new allowances. All new kinship carers are offered a referral to the income maximisation team at the time they become kinship carers, and this offer is repeated at the annual financial review. A review of the potential foster carers' finances is part of the initial assessment process, and wherever need arises, an offer of a referral to the income maximisation or debt management team is fulfilled, and that can happen at any time. The Scottish Recommended Allowance is intended to cover the cost of supporting a child, such as clothing, food, after-school activities, etc. The Scottish Government has identified £16 million of funding for the introduction of the new Scottish Recommended Allowance for 23-24. It's been modelled using current local authority expenditure on children in kinship and foster care, including informal kinship care expenditure, and the most up-to-date data from the Children's Social Work Statistics 21-22. Like many local authorities, Falkirk Council currently use 4 age ranges, and we've provided in a table at 5.5, which shows the differentiation of the payments of allowances. The Scottish recommended allowance uses 3, effectively combining the 5 to 10 and 11-15 age ranges into one standard age bracket. So, by way of a recommendation to you today, to ensure transparency of our local allowance framework, we are proposing to align the local age ranges with the nationally applied ranges within the SRA. The £16 million funding is for the full year 23-24 and payments backdated to the 1st of April 2023. And as I've said, we have applied the new allowances and are currently working through the process of the backdating. A decision on the national mechanism for annual review and or uprating of the Scottish recommended allowance is yet to be taken by Scottish ministers. Members have been asked to approve the recommendations in this report on the basis that it is anticipated that there are no additional costs to the Council. The funding will be reoccurring and any surplus will allow us to grow our foster and kinship care numbers without financial detriment to the Council. And by way of a conclusion, Convener, the promise and its plan 21-24 make it clear that providing financial support to kinship and foster carers is a key element to ensuring that caregivers are best equipped to support and nurture the children and young people they are looking after. I refer committee back to the recommendations at section 2. I'm happy to be joined today by Sharon Lang, who's the service manager for the family placement team, and she's joined me to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome. I'll go to Councillor Colley.
Thank you. In supporting the recommendations, I think we need to start by recognising the amazing work that Falkirk foster carers do in supporting children and young people in our district. And I think we've all heard a great deal from foster carers in the area recently, and I think that they do some absolutely amazing work. And I also want to take the opportunity and to say to recognise the committed and expert staff who are doing so much in supporting fostering for Falkirk's children and young people. I know we've all listened to the foster carers in Falkirk with the challenges they face with cost of living, and I think it's a real challenge across the piece. And I'm delighted that this new rate has been agreed nationally. I know from Sarah Lacey and from Councillor Meikle-John that this has been a long time coming. It's taken many years to get to this point, and it really is a good news story. And I welcome the additional funding from the Scottish Government to achieve this, to enable us to deliver improved rates for our foster carers and to backdate it. And I think that it was really important. And thank you to Sarah and her team, and obviously the finance team as well to get those monies backdated. And I think also the points in the report about very much looking to how we can support foster carers' cost of living expenses in relation to income maximisation, and the 5% uplift that the service were able to give. So I think just in conclusion that this is good news and a definite step in the right direction. So thank you very much to everyone involved.
Thank you, Councillor Colley. I'm going to formally second the report. While it has been a long time coming, there's been a lot of discussions over the years, particularly around kinship care and the getting to that equality with foster carers, but recognising more importantly the quality of the work that is at rehabilitation, foster carers and kinship carers, and while there's a familial link often there, it is the dedication and the well-being of the young people that are very much to the fore. However, people do have to live, they have bills to pay, and that's recognised. And while it won't address all of the issues that have been raised by the foster carers, I think it goes some way to help, particularly with the cost of living rises, and indeed the developing that relationship with the local authority, particularly to provide the support that they need, and the training and access to that training going forward. So I think we've moved into a different sphere with that particular area of kinship and foster care, and look forward to seeing it develop as we go forward. So I'm more than happy to second, and we'll open it up for any questions or comments. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Convener. I want to echo what Councillor Colley has just said. We absolutely welcome this funding. It is invaluable, and obviously offer our thanks to all the kinship carers and foster carers that we already have. They're literally changing the lives of our young people by offering a place of safety and security. Yeah, the role is very challenging, but it's incredibly fulfilling, and certainly nobody takes on that responsibility because of the money, but knowing that Falkirk Council is going to be behind our carers every step of the way, offering adequate funding to make it more accessible to many, as well as offering training and support. I just hope that after this announcement, it'll encourage and empower people to recognise that maybe they are able to open up their homes, and I would love to see the next time we come to a meeting that more Falkirk residents have considered opening their hearts and their homes to our children who need it.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. I share the previous comments that have just been made. It's already been stated that nationally there's a pot of £16 million available to fund this at the moment. Can Sarah maybe just confirm what Falkirk's actual share is of this pot? How much money are we actually getting?
Sarah.
Thank you, Convener. I will access that information and provide it to Councillor Nimmo after this meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. The next point, obviously this money is not going to be ring fenced, so there's no protection being built into the funding for this. It's getting paid and it's going to be factored into our annual budget settlement. Now, I'm just wondering, in years to come, is this going to be inflation proofed, and is it going to take account of cost of living costs? Because I'd be looking for this to be increased in future years to cover that.
Sarah, do you want to take that?
Yes, thank you. Happy to. So the intentions of Scottish Government to consider the future remuneration for the kinship carers and foster carers with regard to allowances is currently subject to consideration. So we'll keep a close eye on developments in that particular area. There is going to be, and we've stated in the report, a surplus in terms of the funding that we've received from Scottish Government and that we're currently utilising in terms of the backdated payments to foster carers and kinship carers. Fundamentally, we require to be able to grow into that particular funding space with our determination around the ongoing recruitment strategy for foster carers, as outlined earlier by Councillor Patterson. So the funding that we receive from Scottish Government isn't going to increase if we increase our population of foster carers or kinship carers, which we're very determined to do and have very clear approaches set out in closer to home strategy to meet. So we absolutely need to make sure that we're keeping scope within that funding to be able to quite dramatically increase our numbers of foster carers and kinship carers. And just following on from Councillor Patterson's comments, if anybody is even just giving thought and early consideration to their interest in being a foster carer, then the family placement team has lots of information available online, and we're really, really happy to support, as I said, that very early conversation and to be able to explore with any potential carer what that might look like for them and the support they would receive from the family placement team alongside the financial remuneration that's available. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. I mean, there's obviously a danger with this money being included in the normal financial settlement and the way that the council finances are going as far as cuts are concerned. I'd be looking for some sort of guarantee that this money is not going to be subject to future cuts. It's a very important service and it's a very important item of business that we're dealing with here. And our kinship carers and our foster carers deserve to have this money protected for the future. Can you maybe comment on that as well?
Thank you, Convener. The council is very supportive of Closer to Home's ambitions to very much grow our kinship carer and foster care population. I think what this allowance does in terms of the kind of standardisation of a minimum allowance that must be paid really reinforces the position that we need to be able to sustain the budget that goes with that growing population of kinship and foster carers. So there would be confidence in that space, I think, with the whole support that sits around our strategy around Closer to Home.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Convener.
I would also say that we need to be careful in not sending mixed messages to government, because there has been a lot of criticism around ring fencing and restricted funding, and asking for local government to do what's right. And this is one of those areas that we will do what's right, and make sure that we do continue to fund that particular area, because it is a growing area. But that's, you know, we need to be careful about just those mixed messages around ring fencing. We can't ask one and not the others. I've got Agnes.
Yes, I'm Agnes Mullen. I'm one of the religious representatives. I would just like to know how many children are in care at the moment, and how you identify the need for them being put into care in this area.
If I could take that question, if that's okay. So at the moment we have around 72 children in foster care, some placed with our internal foster carers and some external, but majority of them are now with our internal carers. They come to our care when all efforts have been made to try and sustain them at home and support their families to do so. But when it becomes unsafe or untenable, the decision is taken that they need to come to be looked after elsewhere. We would always look to family first, and we would look for kinship carers. If there isn't suitable family available at the time, then our next step would always be look at foster care, and we would always try to keep them with our local foster carers so that they can maintain their contact with their family, their school, their community, and their friends. Once they are in our care, it doesn't stop there. Our teams work really hard to try and sustain families to have children returned home where it's safe to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask one more question? How do we find out about this, the recruitment of carers? Is that, I know you said it's online. Could you maybe let me have a note of that, the online bit, so that I can pass it on? Thank you.
Just also, I don't know whether Sarah wants to maybe say that there has been a promotional recruitment for foster carers ongoing for quite some time, and we have managed to be relatively successful through that. But it's something that periodically comes up through the council website, through the council's comms, etc. Where, you know, we ask people that are interested to get in touch, and there's various initial programmes around those initial conversations, and to allow people to learn a wee bit more about the role and what it entails. Okay, I've got Councillor Murtagh, then Councillor Hannah.
Thanks, Convener. And I would echo the previous comments of all speakers about how valuable a role and a service that our foster carers do. And I think that we did hear a lot from foster carers recently. And one thing that came across loud and clear was how important the family setting is, and that the children which are within their care are part of their family, and they're providing not just a caring environment that meets certain needs, they're providing love, and that is a wonderful thing, I think, to aspire to and to encourage, and definitely I think we all send that message if you are thinking about it, to get in touch. But I think one of the issues that was brought up within those meetings was about the situation where, when it comes to holidays, and very much that foster carers, as we've heard, never would enter this for the money, but that they very much would wish to take the children that they care for on holiday with them as part of their family, and that while they're entitled to respite care and would never say that anybody who needs that respite care shouldn't seek to take it as is their entitlement, which absolutely would be encouraged, that when that happens, if they do take respite care, there are those who are providing respite obviously are paid for doing that from within the budget that we currently have within to fund us. And one of the asks that came forward from the foster carers was that given that there will be additional costs for them to take those children on holiday with them, as is encouraged to do, that perhaps if they do that and don't take that respite care, that the portion of the funding that's already allocated could be reallocated to them. And I know that that's a complex issue and needs consideration, but I just wanted to raise it today to say that's something that's come across. I think it would be within the current budget envelope and not need a specific decision about the finances, and to say, you know, if that could be considered, because it's something that's been brought to us, and I think it'd be good to raise that publicly so that we can say, no, we're listening and putting that forward. So I just wanted to ask you if that's something that we can consider formally, and just have a look at.
Thank you. The allowance follows the child. That's our principle. So if the child does go to stay with a short break carer, then the short break carer gets the child allowance. In recognition that and an encouragement to take foster carers to take the children with them, they get double allowance at the start of the summer. So they will get 3 instead of 1 allowance, and that is to support carers to take the children with them on their holidays. I do recognise that some of the costs don't stop because the child is moved to stay with somebody else for a fortnight, and it is something we have given commitment that we will review.
Thank you. Councillor Hannah.
I think I would just reiterate all the comments that others have made about the importance of foster carers and the fantastic job that they do. Like others, I have met with some and heard the stories. They've got very big hearts. I'm very glad to hear that the situation is one where the move towards a national allowance, which is a good thing to have that common allowance across all foster carers. I'm glad to hear that there will be nobody who will lose out as a result of the change. But can you give us some assurance as to what proportion of foster carers will get an uplift? Is it the majority? Are there some who are not getting any uplift? And is there some way of giving a little support in that situation?
Councillor Hannah, there is one age band where there would not be an uplift. Everybody else will get an uplift. Off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I can't tell you the numbers that are involved in that. But we are absolutely committed to no detriment. So while there is one age band who are already getting higher than the national allowance, we will not deduct that. But I can come back to you with the figures for each age band.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Spears.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I was wondering if you could, and my first question is if you could expand on the statement that every effort is made for children taken into care, that kinship carers for child is fully investigated and intimated. I think you said that you, first of all, would make every effort for any child before they went into care to see if you could get kinship care for them. Can you expand on how you do that? And my second question is kinship care payment. Does that also include people who look after children like during school holidays to allow the parents to continue to work?
Thank you.
If we could come to your second question first, Councillor Spears, that wouldn't account. There'd be no payment to families in that situation. The kinship care allowance is paid to children that are looked after and accommodated, and they have to meet that criteria before payments are made. To turn to your first question, immediately we already, when we're working with families, we start to identify who in their family network is able to support them before we get to the stage of thinking that they might need to come into our care. So we'd already asking mums, dads, is there granny, auntie, who's around that could support, perhaps take the child to school in the morning if mum and dad have got 3 or 4 children they're trying to get organised. So that work starts at the very, very beginning. Once if the situation deteriorates and we have to make that decision, then we would be asking the family members that we immediately know if they are able to support the child, and we would undertake an immediate assessment of that, where we establish through our partners with police and health and our own records if there is anything that would suggest that it wouldn't be a safe place for that child to stay in that emergency basis. Further to that, we also have a third sector partner who provide family group decision making, and they also take the opportunity to look even wider and try to make further family connections if that's not something we've been able to achieve. Even if a child were in an emergency placement and to go into foster care, again, we would, even though it was an emergency, we would still look for family in that immediacy, and if they weren't available, afterwards we would continue to ask and search far and wide for family members who may be in a position to care for the child.
Is this a new thing?
No, this has been our policy and our good practice for a very long time.
How many years?
Well, I've been qualified social worker for 18 years, and that's always been our social work's perspective.
Okay, my response to my second question about family that look after maybe their daughter or son's a single parent, and during the summer they've obviously got to work, and it's a great deal of expense for them to put them into paid care. But if their family's willing to help, they don't get any of this payment. So if you're working and you've got kids, you're disadvantaged here.
It requires, as I said, the child to meet the eligibility of being a looked after and accommodated child. There is an assessment of foster carers by our team in order to meet a certain eligibility to receive funding. So there may be family that do step in, and they may do a shared care arrangement with grantee looking after them sometime for the auntie perhaps to work. Then that's something we would look at about how the funding and how kinship care allowance would be offered at that point.
Yeah, I'm just thinking maybe two old couples sitting talking, and one's getting paid for looking after these grandkids, and the other one who does it on an ad hoc basis to help out with. Sorry,
I'm
to help out with work
I think the
arrangements.
officers actually answered the question. And
I accept
think
the answer
you've
from the
had the
officer.
answer. I'm going to move on. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. I had a briefing with Sharon and Sarah yesterday because I missed the briefing when the rest of the elected members had it, and very encouraging, the extra money coming, and I'm sure during the future months and years the communication between the service and the foster carers and the kinship carers will be very important for keep the ones we've got and encourage new ones to come along. I just think that the money that they're given has already been stated. There's nobody in this position for the money. They're there because they care about the children, and at the heart of it, the children and young people are the most important thing in this process. I've got a situation, but I'll bring it up offline with Sarah and Sharon, one of my constituents who have took on the kinship for their grandchild for many, many years and get no support because it didn't go through social services at first. So she gets no support at all, and she's had the grandchild for years. But I'll take that offline and speak to the service. Thanks, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Cairn. That's the appropriate way to deal with that particular situation. Okay, there are no further lights on, so are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 7, and it's support for children seeking asylum or fleeing war in the Ukraine, and it is with Sharon.
Okay, thank you very much, convener. Purpose of my report today is to provide you with an update following my previous submission, which came to committee on the 21st of March 2023. I would ask the committee to note our recommendations, which are to note the content of the report and the progress made to support the children and young people, and to recognise the continued financial pressures on children's services in providing accommodation to children seeking asylum in the absence of family-based foster placements. The previous report set out the challenges that we've faced in meeting our statutory responsibilities, and at that point there was a discrepancy of funding from what we received from the Home Office and our care costs, and at that point there was a shortfall of £353,000. I was very grateful for the committee in agreeing that we could recruit 2 social work assistants to ensure that we met our statutory duties, and that these posts were to stand for 2 years. Okay, so since the report, I submitted the report, we now have 13 young people who have come to stay with us through the National Transfer Scheme. I submitted the report, there was 12, and that's just to give you an illustration of how quickly the rota is moving at the moment and how unpredictable it is. So because we have also 4 young people who have come to stay with us following living in a dispersal hotel in Falkirk, we now have 17 young people that we are providing support and accommodation who are currently seeking asylum. As noted in the report, there has been a a legal challenge, and that plus a review of the rota has meant again that the rota is circulating quicker than was previously. If I could just move on now to speak about the situation in Ukraine. Our resettlement team is currently supporting 50 families, which includes 52 children, in both permanent accommodation and in the Welcome Hub. And we have 90 children from Ukraine who are within our education from nursery through to high school. The situation with the funding for that is that due to the careful management of that, we believe that money will be able to provide the service through to December 2024. But currently we have no further indication of whether that money will come for the further grant from the government. I'm delighted to tell you that we have 2 social work assistants who have been recruited, who have now been allocated to the 17 young people and have been out and begun to meet with them, building their relationships and supporting them to integrate into their local community. And that has taken some pressure off of our locality social workers, our initial response team social workers who were filling that gap alongside all the other pressures upon them. The figures that were provided were when we were considering at the point of the report that we were caring for 16 young people, and you will have seen from the report that with those 16 we are looking at a shortfall of 416,560. Obviously, again with a further arrival last Friday, that will increase again. So I'd ask the committee if they could, sorry, I've just lost it. If they could note the report and note the progress in the work that we've done. And again, with my thanks for agreeing that we could recruit this 2 social work assistants. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I'll go to Councillor Colley.
I'll be quite brief. Thank you very much, Sharon, for the update report. It's a significant challenge that the Home Office continues to underfund this critical work by not recognising the costs of residential placements nor of continuing care. But I would like to recognise the work of our staff and the various organisations in Falkirk and our communities in welcoming and supporting refugees and asylum seekers, particularly children and young people. As we see in Ukraine, Yemen, Afghanistan and more, and most recently Gaza, conflict, famine and natural disaster leave children and young people too often as its victims, forced to flee from their homes and countries. Whilst we can draw the Home Office attention to its underfunding, and I think we should continue to do that as vociferously as we possibly can. We should never ever stop being a place of safety and a chance to thrive for children and young people in this area.
Thank you, Councillor Colley. I'm happy to second the report and indeed recognise the huge amount of work the staff have done under some very difficult circumstances, and some harrowing stories around how these young people have come to Falkirk. And as has been said, the underfunding of the Home Office is abhorrent to the care of these young people. But again, as like other local authorities up and down the country, we've stepped up to make sure that the young people are safe, secure and cared for appropriately, and therefore are able to go through that healing process and start to thrive and look to the future. And I think that's really important. But we should never forget that the underfunding does put pressures on the council elsewhere, and we need to continue to press for that to make sure that we do get the appropriate funding from the Home Office going forward. But I think the important thing is to make sure that the young people are at the centre of this, and given their at times some horrendous experience and the journeys they've had to get here, we have taken up and stepped into that duty of care, and I thank staff and all of those that are supporting them to do that. I'll now open it up for any questions or comments in relation to this report. Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. With regards to the young children come from Ukraine, I met one last week in one of our schools. I'll only say what school it was in case it identifies the child, but happy young fellow came here, couldn't speak any English at all, and very at home in his surroundings, and I'm sure that's what we've tried to do with all the children that have came, and as a council, which has already been stated, we were quite happy to take as many children as possible, and as Councillor Colley says, all the different aspects of the humanitarian crisis all over the world, the people who aren't at fault are certainly not the children, so the more we can support them going forward, the better. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I've got Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. Just a couple of points. It's already been stated that we have 90 kids in education at the moment. Do we have enough English language teachers to cover this additional classroom?
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Nimmo. We recognise we were going to have to support our young people coming into the system, so we've increased the number of staff we have in our English as a second language outreach team. So we at the moment are managing to meet that need, but we're keeping it under close eye in case we need to increase it again.
Okay, thanks for that. Now, with the continuing Home Office underfunding, that's obviously a big issue going forward. We could see an increase in the number of kids that we're having to look after in this respect. The underfunding, it's already been stated that Falkirk Council has enough resources to do us up to, I think it was December 24. What is Falkirk Council actually having to contribute at the moment financially? Do we have a figure?
I think Mr. Greenhorn may have some information on that.
It's a really good question, Councillor Nimmo. Firstly, the figure that we have is certainly what is set in tablets of stone is the grant money that we've got from the Scottish Government via the Home Office. It's outlined in the report, roughly 413,000. So at the moment, we have now recruited the staff. There was an initial delay in the recruitment getting it done. As Sharon outlined earlier on, there is extra staff being taken in to both children and families. As Rona said earlier on, we've recruited to the English second language team. And on top of that, we've got 1 or 2 staff that are supporting the CLD functions as well. So at the moment, we're still trying to look at the overall cost. Some of these payroll costs have still got to come through in the next month or so. But we're quite confident that based on the current projections, that the money we have got will last us, as you said quite rightly, to December 24. However, that's based on the current estimates, as we said earlier on, and as Councillor Kerr outlined, and as Sarah outlined, the numbers do change, and they're based on the current numbers. You are correct. There is 90 young people currently in our establishments, 5 in early years and 90 in both primary and secondary settings. There was 97, but again, it's fluid. 7 of those young people have then moved on elsewhere. So you're absolutely correct. We've got 90 within our current schools. We're looking at it very closely. The next update report we give will give a more definitive position in terms of our expenditure that we've incurred to date vis-a-vis the £413,000 grant income that we've got.
Right, thanks for that, Gary. So irrespective of the underfunding from the Home Office, we're currently working within the money that we've been allocated. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, Councillor Nimmo. In terms of the Ukrainian Resettlement Scheme, the Education Support Grant, we're working within that grant just now, and we've not overspent in any way that grant just now.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. We're all saddened by the fact that this is a necessity. The dreadful problems that are happening elsewhere, and the fact that young people and children have to flee from war-torn areas is a matter of great concern to us all. And I want to give thanks to all the staff and the schools and the school staff and the communities who have welcomed children and young people into their homes and into their hearts. Because it is essential. Sadly, it is essential that happens. I think we do have to continue to pressurise to ensure that we get adequate funding for this, but I'm very glad to hear that it is still being contained within the existing budget. I think that's important, but that should not stop us from pressurising to ensure that additional funding's there. Sadly, it does not appear likely that there's going to be any huge improvement in the situation in the near future. So I think we need to keep a close eye on this one and look at what we are doing to support children and young people throughout this difficult time.
Thank you, Councillor Hannah. There are no other lights on to speak, so are we happy to agree the report? Okay, thank you. We're going to this is an actual break here between the two sections. We're going to take a short recess of 10 minutes. It would also give groups the opportunity to consider amendments which have been put forward at this time as well. But just to thank you to Sarah and Sharon for the reports today. Okay, thank you. Folks, I think we're all back now. Councillor Colley's not feeling too well, so I'm afraid she's had to go home. So I'm sure we'll get an update later on how she's feeling. We move on to our education functions, and item 8 is the Standards and Quality Report 2022 to 2023 in the National Improvement Framework, and I'll go to Mrs. Jay. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener, and thanks again for the opportunity to bring this annual report to you and the committee. And I'd like to thank my team in advance for the work that they've put into contributing to and collating the contents of the Standards and Quality Report for session 2022-23. And I hope that you found the report interesting and informative. In the recommendations, you're asked to improve the final submission to the Scottish Government and the publication of this report on Falkirk Council's website. Sections 4 to 4.3 provide you with information and background to the Standards and Quality Report and its link to the National Improvement Framework, its function as part of the Education Division's statutory reporting requirements, and its purpose to provide summary information of progress and improvements made towards the 22-23 Service Improvement Plan. Section 5 notes that the Standards and Quality Report is a sample and summary of the totality of the work undertaken by the Education Division during session 22-23. Information is provided about the continuous self-evaluation and the range of sources from which data and intelligence are drawn, and how this leads to identifying priority improvement areas for the next Service Improvement Plan. For session 23-24, and indeed we think until at least 2026, we'll have a priority focus on curriculum, inclusion and equality, learning, teaching and assessment. Section 6 notes that the consultation has taken place with educational establishments and central teams, and this is an ongoing process. Section 8 concludes that the report is an overview of the totality of the work undertaken. We couldn't possibly report on every single thing that we do. As we've said before, that would fell a rainforest and have you reading for many, many hours. So we choose to sample things that have had the most impact. Of particular note within this report is the focus on attendance, pages 69 to 71. Thanks to members who joined the Lunch and Learn session on the 30th of October to hear about this work in detail and the interest shown in your questions and comments. This will continue to be a focus for us over the next few years. Mental health and wellbeing, highlighted in pages 91 and 92 for children, young people and their families, will also remain an area for focused attention and support. The Lunch and Learn session on the 11th of December is dedicated to mental health and wellbeing and provide you with a detailed insight into community mental health and wellbeing services and the impact of these supports and initiatives across our service. Pages 93 to 95 note the work on equalities, pupil voice and learning for sustainability. I'd like to offer a briefing session to members to provide further insight into the extensive work being undertaken to help children and young people see the synergy and connection across all of these areas with the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child. And finally, leadership and workforce development, featured in pages 108 to 109. As a service, there's been a deliberate and sustained investment in building leadership, skill and capacity and collaboration since 2017. We've recently participated in the Association of Directors of Education, known as ADES, collaborative review. This involved a panel of 11 Directors of Education and Chief Officers from other local authorities, Education Scotland senior managers and HMI inspectors. They focused on how successful we have been in developing an empowered system and met with 18 focus groups over 2 days, and that involved 54 of our heads of establishment from early learning and childcare, primary, secondary and ASN sectors. Again, I would like to offer a briefing session to share this very positive report with you and the work that we plan to do to further strengthen our empowerment across the system. Thank you, Convener, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rona. I'll go to Councillor Sinclair.
Thank you, Convener, and I'm pleased to be able to move the recommendations within this report. This is the first of 2 comprehensive reports today that give a picture of the work throughout our educational establishments across Falkirk Council area. Our Standards and Quality Report gives a detailed look at the ongoing work over the past year, the achievements of our learners and staff, and reflects on where we can look to improve. And it is right to consider the backdrop where the full impact of the pandemic is still unknown and further pressures on services, both financially and operationally, continue to present real challenges. While there is a significant amount of detail in the report, as Mrs Jay's already alluded to, it is only a snapshot of what goes on right across Falkirk, which to all intents and purposes is incredibly positive as far as I've seen. We have an education service within Falkirk Council that is striving to do the best it can for children and young people throughout the area, and I'm especially delighted to see that schools and establishments, through the leadership within them, continue to look for opportunities to collaborate with the whole community and the wider council organisation. It's also really positive to see that our education services are being recognised by the likes of ADES and Education Scotland. Recent meetings, for example, of heads of establishment, apart from being wholly positive, have provided a clear commitment to further collaboration. One of the highlights at a previous meeting was a presentation by the poverty team on resources and information available to help alleviate these challenges and point parents and families in the right direction of support wherever that may be required. Of course, without the continued passion, leadership and dedication of our establishment leaders and staff and central team, we wouldn't be able to make the same level of progress that's detailed within the Standards and Quality Report. I'd like to thank them for everything they do daily to ensure that education in Falkirk provides a service that are the strong foundations and building blocks for the future of children and young people across the Falkirk Council area. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Convener. I'd like to thank Ian and Rona for covering every point there. I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you. Councillor Murtagh, I think you've got some questions and then you maybe with your amendment.
Thanks, Convener. Yeah, and I also would pay absolutely tribute to the amount of work that goes on across the establishment, and I acknowledge that not every detail can be put into a report, even with Gary's talents to be able to describe them, which are probably similar to my own. But I think it's important that placing the human rights and the needs of every child and young person at the centre of education is the first key priority in the National Improvement Framework. So that's what my questions are about. So I'd like to ask Rona about this and how, within the report on page 90, under meeting the needs of children and young people, all children and young people, it's assessed that GIRFEC practices across children's services are rated at green, and also on page 85. Similarly, under leadership and workforce development, that continuing to support establishments to embed UNCRC is also rated at green. So on the matter of decision making within schools, and that being across the whole estate, can Rona give us a flavour of how that can be demonstrated that those ratings are at green that we're being asked to agree?
Thank you. Rona.
Thank you, Convener. In terms of GIRFEC, I think one of the reasons we make that green is because of that partnership approach that we have. We have our links with our Children's Services social work colleagues. We have our partnership post specifically that looks at GIRFEC commissioning across the service. In terms of our own priorities, getting it right for every child has been part of our core work for many years now, as you will know. And again, within our service, we are dedicating support to that. In terms of equality specifically that you've asked, we have seconded an officer just to look at how we develop our UNCRC work across the piece. That officer is in charge at the moment of developing the whole suite of training that goes across for staff and for our young people. We also have our Children and Young People's group, which at the moment has 223 members, I think, and growing. And that's our forum to take all things children's rights and give a voice there. And our young people have also been involved in the videos and resources that are being rolled out to all schools from their point of view and what that means. And I suppose of central importance to us at the moment is our Learning to Achieve strategy, which, if you've managed to read it, has developed from its 2012 forefather. And now in every section of that makes reference to UNCR rights of the child in there. So it's a huge spectrum of work that we're doing. I suppose that's why I've offered the briefing, Councillor Murtagh. It's a very difficult thing to put into a report. And it would be important for me that if we do that for you, that we bring the voices of young people to that you hear from those who are doing the training and those who are doing the policy and development and strategy for the service. So I hope that gives you a flavour.
It gives me a flavour, and I thank Rona very much for the answer. I know, and I can see from the report, that there's very excellent examples of work being undertaken in engaging groups of children in different ways, and I pay tribute to the work that's being done and acknowledge that. I think the difficulty, and when I come to move my amendment, is that in showing that those rights are universal, and the UNCRC being talked about and the embedding of it in Scots law, but the UNCRC was signed in 1990 and came into force in 1992, which was incidentally the year that I started in high school. So it does feel like a long time ago, and that we can have young people come to this committee and come to different groups. Those rights are universal regardless of whether you know you've got them or not, or you feel empowered to speak up about them. So I'm asking you about when new rules in schools are created, for example, and new processes, and we assess whether it's the school day or something, anything at all, that children's rights assessment, how can you show me and demonstrate to me, because this is being asked to sign off this report. This is the Standards and Quality report that we are saying that's rated at green. But how can I be confident when I can give you quite a few examples where I do have concerns? So how can you reflect that?
So in every school, and we have young people here who can maybe add a bit more to what I'm going to say to you, but we do have in every school at a minimum pupil councils and groups. So when schools are setting their rules and their charters and whatever it is that they're trying to do to run their schools well and make the experience the best it can be, they involve their young people. And maybe Jessie could tell you how she's involved in such decisions in her own school, if you want to ask her. We certainly make that an expectation, that consultation with our young people is really important when they're developing anything to do with how the school runs.
I mean, what I would say, and I'm very much happy and would like to hear from the young people. I obviously hear quite a lot from young people myself on a whole bunch of areas. But what I would say is that I find as an adult sitting in this committee, it's quite hard to bring these things up. And I was saying this before, and you know, I promised to be an unfeirty into Children's Parliament about children's rights. And even as an adult who's been a portfolio holder for education, it's really quite nerve-wracking to put your hand up and speak up about these things, because you know you're going to get criticism, and you know that you know it might be quite difficult. And when you're a young person, the peer pressure even to get out the door in the morning can be really quite challenging about a whole bunch of things. And many young people just aren't in a position, even if they really feel strongly, to want to engage or to come anywhere near a group or anywhere near a committee. And those children's rights are guaranteed just as much as anybody else who's able to speak up. And I think in particular in the matter of pupil councils, I think sometimes the kind of onerous application process, should I say, or the kind of things that you have to sign up to even get into those groups can be off-putting for some children, not all. So it's important that voices are speaking up for this whole, how is it embedded for every single child, every single rule. And I'll, when I move my amendment, perhaps elaborate on some of the examples rather than taking up more time and asking you questions. Okay. Yes, certainly. So is it, if it's been circulated, and I don't know if it's on the screen, it's a very simple amendment, which in effect I'm not contending that there's not good practice going on. What I'm saying is that to demonstrate that, I would like a report to come back. I welcome a briefing, but I would like a report. So it's on the screen. I can't read it from there. But that agrees that a report be brought back to a future meeting of this executive, which will outline how new and existing practices within schools are created, reviewed and assessed in cognizance of the articles of UNCRC and other human rights legislation, as UNCRC is on top of other legislation, and that reflects the needs of all children and young people. So that's what I'm asking. I'm not contending that if there are practices which I may have concerns about, that they haven't been through a rights-based assessment. What I will say is, and I've raised this as the equality and human rights champion of the council, that I have been asking questions over the last, well, quite a long time, but let's just say 18 months, and particularly since the start of the term, about how certain practices are assessed when they're brought in line with children's rights. And the reason that I'm bringing this up today is that I don't feel that I am satisfied that it's been demonstrated to me that when procedures are brought in, that they have gone through a children's rights process. And if after having several months of having asked these questions, it's not easy to demonstrate that to me, then I feel that that gives me some concerns about what's in the report in terms of if it is the case, then I think it should be easy to demonstrate. And some examples might be where we say, OK, well, Article 28 of UNCRC, where you're talking about the right to dignity in school rules, when it comes to school rules and procedures, that if it's fine for a process to be, scanning a QR code to leave a classroom to go to the toilet, to walk past corridors worth of locked toilets when you're desperate to go, to then come to the toilet where you're handed an iPad to fill in a Google form where you're not aware what will happen with that information, to then go to the toilet. If that is fine and it's been assessed as a children's right, fine, but demonstrate it that it has been assessed in line with the needs of the children. Similarly, I think there are concerns about when we make decisions about how long the school day is or how long lunch time should be, we're obviously prioritising the health and well-being of our children. But if they're having to make decisions about whether they can go to the toilet or whether they can eat during their lunchtime, then that's not meeting the needs of the children. Now, there may be lots of other considerations which the schools have to put in place, and I'm not saying that there aren't, But I do think that those things, when there are rules and procedures which are changed or brought in or need reviewed, I do think that embedding UNCRC and the rights of children needs to be demonstrated to the children, to the parents, and that in other articles of UNCRC, whether it's Article 12 or Article 13, where we're talking about empowering and making children aware of their rights, and they're about their right to even on their individual basis, privately go and have and express their concerns, that they should feel that that is a positive encouragement and not that they are causing a fuss or insisting on something. And sometimes I have my concerns that that's not always the message being given. And like I say, I find it quite difficult to bring these things up today because of some of the discussions I've had around these matters. And I could give you lots of examples, and I know that I've sent a document to you and to others with many examples, and I'm not going to list them here. But I think those are some crucial points where you can see quite obviously there are particular need. And if it's not demonstrated, I would like it to be demonstrated. And I think a report would help with that, a briefing would help with that. But I do have concerns that the rights of all children in the UNCR and as laid out in UNCRC and other legislation are not routinely assessed in the way that perhaps would be ideal and as is laid out in this report. And that if the answer to me saying, have you done a children's rights assessment is, I don't know what they are, then that's a concern. And I under those circumstances, wouldn't want to sign off this report. But I realise that that is not really an option. Then the future report wouldn't have to go. So I'm not trying to be contrarian and say, let's not approve this report. I'm trying to find a constructive way forward that says, I have concerns about this. I have concerns about the way that children's rights are assessed within our schools in practice. And I would like more information to have it demonstrated to me that my concerns are unfounded. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Steenbank?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'll be brief. I think as the Equalities and Human Rights Champion sort of outlined quite a few points, I think we've considered this and are happy to support the amendment. I think if we're to be successful with embedding the UNCRC and progressing a Scottish system that respects the right of the child and looks to advance, I think the work outlined in this report, and I also think the supplement of the amendment will help within that. I think the language around children's rights has managed to improve positively in the few years since I left school, and we have a lot of young people as well as council staff to thank for that, and I think they have better recognition of their rights. I'd like to thank Rona for a briefing session on this and the outline of the pupil voice within this report. I think it's an important framework, and I think this amendment will help supplement that. I'd also like to thank groups such as the Champs Board and Pupil Voice that I had the privilege to go and speak to a couple of months ago, and I think they've managed to teach, I think, elected members and council staff a lot about their relevant experience. I do have further questions, but I'd like to thank teachers, children's services and pupils for this report, and I think this amendment helps to serve the objectives of that. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Steenbank, and I will come back to you in due course about the questions about the rest of the report, but maybe go to Mrs J if she wishes to respond to the amendment in the first place, and then I'll go to the portfolio holder.
Okay, thank you, Convener. Councillor Murtagh, I'm happy to report back to you. I think to report to committee would be difficult in terms of the breadth of the work and how to make that, as you say, evidenced. I would want to bring in the voice of young people, those who are delivering training, maybe people from schools who can tell you a bit about how they do that as managers and staff. And to do that in a report is probably quite difficult. However, a briefing, I think, would be able to fulfil that role to you. So happy to do that for you.
And Councillor Sinclair, you want to come respond to?
Yeah, thanks. I don't disagree with the principle of further information coming forward. I find it difficult to believe that the full ask of what you're looking for would be able to be provided within what would ostensibly be a high-level report to committee. And I wonder if perhaps a more full briefing available to all elected members, because there is a significant amount of interest in the UNCRC, how that's embedded, and obviously in advance of hopefully it being embedded within Scots law at some point. I wonder if that would be more of a compromise to bring it to all members as a briefing, perhaps a larger session. And I wonder if Mrs. Yee would be able to perhaps outline maybe what, further kind of what a report would look like as opposed to a full briefing session.
I think in terms of a report, it would be difficult to capture the voices that you would want the evidence for. You're looking for absolute evidence and demonstration of, and reports are reports. I think it's always brought to life better when you can speak to people or hear from them in person, and I would prefer to do that. It would also be easier to show you the scope and the scale of the training that we're developing, the work that we're doing across equalities and human rights across the collaborative. We could hear from people there. However, if you wish a narrative to go with that briefing, then I can certainly provide backup narrative to go with any briefing session that comes. Thank you, Mrs. Jay. I think the difficulty is that there would be a lot of interest in that particular briefing and that subject area, and I do believe by all members and indeed potentially others, our co-opted members as well, would be certainly of interest. I don't think we'd be able to do that justice solely by a report in committee, as we have business to get through in the committee, and I think we could spend at least a 2-hour, if not a 3-hour session on that particular item independently of that, and maybe it is a case of there is a short report that is brought forward to the committee, but we have to remember this is a decision-making body, and it would really be for information as much as anything. But that a briefing can take place out with that, which can be far more interactive and indeed enable a bit of debate around aspects of that, which wouldn't necessarily be possible to be done within a slot within the committee papers. So I've got a lot of sympathy with what's been said, but I do think we wouldn't be able to do it justice, recognising that these agendas have other items on them, and the time that might take and the interest from others. So that may well be a pragmatic way forward, that there's a short report does come, but there is that briefing, recognising this is a decision-making body and we really shouldn't be having reports for information. It should be decisions on that, but it's for the committee to give further consideration to. Councillor Spears.
Much pleasure in seconding the amendment.
It's already been seconded, Councillor Spears.
No, he says he supported it. He didn't say seconded it.
He did say seconded it.
Won't all fight over me.
Well, I'm sure you'll have noticed I've had my light on for some considerable time, and if you're going to continually leave me to near the end, then it's difficult. But I believe,
Councillor Spears, I'm going to take issue with that, because you usually have your light on first, and I usually do take you first, and I don't leave you to the end. On this occasion, I can guarantee that Councillor Steinbach had his light on before you.
human rights and democracy are at the base, surely, of our education system. So I would recommend we bring back a report, because we need to see that report, and that report needs to be in writing. And hopefully everybody will support that report, because if they're not at the basis of our education system, then we have trouble. Thank you.
Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. Just a couple of points to make. This is obviously a very important report, and I'm just wondering, has this gone to scrutiny? If not, why not?
Mrs. Jay.
Thanks, Convener. Councillor Nimmo, we've not been asked to take this report to scrutiny before, but there would be no problem in doing so if people were interested to spend more time on it.
I think because of the implications that's tied up in the report, it should really go to scrutiny first for them to look at it and make whatever comment that they might have. It might help things moving forward. Is there a full EPIA to support this report?
Not for this one, Councillor Nimmo, because it's a retrospective report. It's not a plan or a change to anything. It's just reporting on what has been. So we haven't for this one, no.
Right, okay. Well, I would have thought again that an EPIA would have been needed to support something like this because of the implications tied up in the report. It's already been highlighted, the possible human rights issues tied up in this. And just personally, I think the world's gone mad when a kid needs to get a QR code just to go to the toilet. I think that's ridiculous. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Nimmo, we can refer this on to scrutiny, but it would come here first. It wouldn't just automatically go to scrutiny. So that is open to the committee to do that.
Well, convener, nobody's mentioned it up until now. That's why I've raised it, because I think it's very important that scrutiny have access to these reports before it comes back.
Mrs. J, you want to comment on that? We're in danger of getting ourselves tied up in knots by having reports coming back and forward to this committee and not actually being clear about our role in the decision making.
Yeah, as I said at the beginning, this is a statutory report that comes annually to committee for approval before it goes to Scottish Government. And I said if members want to refer it on to scrutiny for further discussion, I have no problem at all with that. Happy to do that as suits members.
I think we don't have we haven't had practice in sending things to scrutiny. I think it would be a good idea to do that and allow the Scrutiny Committee to look at it in more depth. I have no issue if there's a general feeling of that. But I'll go to Mr. Moody for information.
It's maybe just a reminder, convener, that we do have the Standing Orders Review at the moment, which is looking at the differing roles between the executives and the scrutiny committees. So maybe rather than innovate on practice, just now we maybe wait the outcome of that, which is reporting to December Council. And I think that's one of the issues that's already been the subject of discussion.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Murtagh in relation to her amendment, having heard what's been said.
Thank you, Convener. I think it's been constructive, and I have attempted, whether I've achieved it or not, to be brief in the preamble of not rehearsing some of the arguments which indeed Mr. Moody has said there about whether it is appropriate to have this report to scrutinise. If we're asked to agree it, which is what we're asked for a decision, I don't want to be picking through every single thing in it to say, let me scrutinise it, and perhaps it could go to scrutiny first. But I think one of the things in not wishing to hold up this report is I'm aware that the second report isn't really allowed to proceed until this report is agreed. And
Mr. Moody.
So that doesn't need it added into the amendment or anything.
Convener,
so I think.
Convener, sorry, I never moved anything about it going to scrutiny. I mentioned it, but that was all. I would have thought that the author of the report and your administration might have sent it to scrutiny before it came here. But obviously that didn't happen either.
That has not been the practice in the past, Councillor Nimmo. The reports have always come in front of committee, but it is open to the committee if we wish to send it to scrutiny, and that is still available to us. But I'm going to ask Mr. Moody to come in.
Thank you, convener. And yes, there was a reference to the potential for sending the matter to scrutiny rather than to a PDP. And as the convener correctly says, it's always open to the executive or the Education, Children and Young People Executive to refer a matter to the scrutiny committee. But I think, as we observed earlier on, there is the Standing Orders Review underway that's looking at issues of what properly sits with the executive, what might sit with scrutiny committee as an alternative. So perhaps rather than innovating on practice in the case of this report, to maintain matters as they are, and as Councillor Nimmo, I think, correctly observes, there isn't a formal amendment or move that we transfer the matter to scrutiny in any event. The motion and amendment are as already moved.
Thank you, Colin.
Okay, Councillor Sinclair, did you want a couple of minutes?
Yeah, just to clarify a couple of things.
Okay, if we can just take a couple of minutes to clarify a couple of things with officers, etc., and then we can come back. Okay, thank you, colleagues, for that. I will now go to Councillor Sinclair to sum up.
Thank you, convener. Obviously, what we've heard throughout is that this is a positive report in the main. The details a snapshot of the work that's going on across our establishments and has been going on across our establishments with children and young people and their rights at the heart of everything that we do, as has come out through the debate. I'm accepting of the amendment. I think pragmatically, it's a good way forward. But I have to reiterate, as already been said, that any report will be limited in what it can provide to the committee. But I think the enhancement of that will be a full briefing for all members that's informative and comprehensive, but that it will make things much clearer for members to reflect on and understand the tremendous amount of work that's going on throughout our establishments across the district on both delivering education, but in delivering the aims of the UNCRC. So yeah, we accept the amendment and go from there. But I think that's the pragmatic way forward, Convener.
Okay, thank you for that. In which case, with that amendment and the comments from the portfolio holder, are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, moving on, our final item, which is the forward look, and it's a National Improvement Framework Education Service Recovery and Improvement Plan. Go to Mrs. J. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Convener, and again, thanks for the chance to bring this report to you and to my team and the officers for all of the work that they did in developing this plan, and to the heads of establishment and schools who also had a contribution to it. And again, I'm asking you to approve the plan for final submission to the Scottish Government and Education Scotland. Sections 3 to 4.5 provide you with background and operational information about the statutory requirement to report, taking cognizance of the National Improvement Framework, and to remind you that this is updated annually and published in December each year for the year ahead. Sections 4.4 to 4.6 provided contextual information about the national influences, expectations and recommendations. Of note are the significant number of consultations and reviews associated with the education reform that are currently underway, and the increased level of scrutiny and expectation of accelerated progress coming from the Scottish Government. Appendix 2 of the report provides the high-level strategic plan and the service improvement plan. In the foreword, it notes the Refresh Learning to Achieve strategy. This is our overarching strategy to set what we expect the learning experience to be for our children and young people, and how we expect our staff to deliver and to be as collective in placing the child or young person at the centre as they can be. The Refresh document makes direct links to the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child. The Culture and Practice section of the report plan attempts to summarise the complex context within which we're all operating, and to demonstrate our continued commitment to working with and for our service, as well as to support and challenge that they are expected to take responsibility for. Progress and Improvement section provides a summary of progress and performance, noting the categories of still work to do, good progress and very good progress for each of the education teams. Planning and policy context provides background information to those national influences and recommendations and frameworks within which we operate, noting the challenges of mitigating against the impact of the pandemic and that these still remain. I'd like to reinforce to you again that the full extent of the pandemic within the system will not be known for some years to come. We're reckoning at least 10. And also to remind you that the only year groups within the system that did not have their educational experience disrupted are the current 3 and 4-year-olds in our nurseries and ELCs, and our current primary 1s and 2s. And whilst they may not have had their educational experience disrupted, they did have their early years development disrupted, and their experience and social interactions with families and friends disrupted. This section also provides additional information about how we deliver the Scottish Attainment Challenge framework for accelerated progress, and informs of the evaluation and benchmarking tools that we use and the local plans with which our work aligns. The strategic map at the end of this section provides you with the scale of all that we have to take cognizance of. Strategic plan sections set out the work that we do collectively as a service under priority headings of learning, teaching and assessment, inclusion and equality, and curriculum. When you read this section, you're asked to work down the way for each column to note that we recognise the longevity of these focus areas over 3 years. The final section breaks improvement actions down to team level. This will be for the work of the ELC, early learning and childcare, additional support needs, educational psychology and schools teams. And these will be the bits of information that we rag red, amber, green for you in our next report. Appendix 2 and 3 are the detail of our work around the stretch aims. We're pleased that the Scottish Government have recognised that 1 year is not a stretch aim, and that we're now able to work across 3 years. We're also pleased that we are able to work within the attainment brackets of percentages, which is a much more appropriate and reflective way of how we work as a service. I hope you'll note our continued commitment to keeping attendance and attainment and the achievement of our care experienced children and young people as Score Plus stretch aims. This is being retained by the other 3 local authorities in our collaborative as well. There is an initial EPIA screening being done. It's logged on the register as 006110 or 00610 on the register. It's an initial EPIA because at this time all finances are managed within the budgets that we have. There's no impact or detriment to any of our employees, and there's no recruitment requirements at this time. The conclusion of this report, as well as the national priorities for improvement that we take cognizance of, we also make sure that we're aligning with the Falkirk Plan priorities and the work of our Integrated Children's Services Plan. Thank you, Convener. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Jay. I'll go to Councillor Sinclair.
Thank you, Convener. Again, happy to move the recommendations within the report in front of us today. Again, this is another detailed report in front of us on the work to be undertaken to further improve and boost recovery of our education service in line with national priorities, with the aim of raising attainment, improving attendance and enhancing outcomes for all children and young people. It's clear from the report that education, both locally and nationally, is facing significant change and challenge, as well as a great deal of opportunity. Of course, we don't want to stand still, and this improvement and recovery plan reflects the refreshed Learning to Achieve policies as well as the updated National Improvement Framework. Collaboration is obviously key to this work, as well as across the district. Work continues nationally with Education Scotland and colleagues within other local authorities, while working towards stretch aims that I'm pleased to see now cover a 3-year period until 2026. Of course, our education service continues to self-evaluate, and I've seen firsthand how our establishment leaders with our central team continue to drive forward improvement and do what they can to ensure we continue to deliver quality education for every child and young person in the area. Once again, thanks to our establishment leaders, teachers and staff right across the district for their continued commitment to improvement for our children and young people. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Convener. Happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Murtagh, do you want to move your amendment?
Yeah, just on the amendment. So my amendment is effectively that, however, it's an insertion, it's not deleting anything else, that note that a full EPIA of this plan has been omitted from this report and should be completed and circulated to all elected members and published with the plan on the council website without undue delay, and that all future reports of this nature should be developed alongside a full EPIA as standard, which should be fully accessible to members of the decision-making process. So I understand what Rona has said in terms of the initial screening and the reference number given. That I think that in some ways I feel this amendment shouldn't be necessary, because I think what was already moved and agreed unanimously by all members back in November 20 or December 2022 was that every report would have a linked EPIA that would be accessible to members at the decision-making process, and that was already a decision of elected members, which I think has gone through development and reiteration. I think it's particularly important, and I know in a previous thing, it was in a full council meeting, I paid tribute to, for example, the housing report, or maybe it was in the executive about the local housing strategy, and that I know that much of this report will have been developed with the sort of principles in mind of what would be in an EPIA. But in that report, I could clearly see how one was coming into the other. And I think that that's the thing, that the EPIA and the framework helps to inform the development of the plan. And that's the point of it, not to be done afterwards as the kind of, and I'm not going to use the tick box after. It's developed, and those questions are asked as we develop a plan. And this is a plan, obviously, as was stated previously with the report that's just come, which is very much focusing on equalities, inclusion, and, you know, I think that it would be appropriate for a full EPIA to be done in that circumstance. And I appreciate that there's much work that has been done in that vein, but I think we need to see it. And I think that we need to have it available to us at the time of decision so that we can scrutinise and be aware of it. So I might have some other things to say on the other things in the report, but that's my amendment, just to make sure that we have that availability and that going forward we have that for this report and that it's published without undue delay once it's done. Thank you.
Okay, before I take a second, do you want to respond to that, Mrs. J?
My mic's already on. That's absolutely fine, Councillor Murtaugh. As I said, there's a lot of work being done in the EPI screening already, so it's not a problem at all to complete that and make sure you all have it. Not a problem.
Okay, do you have a formal seconder?
Happy to second that, convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sinclair?
Yeah, I mean, I think the report outlines the reasons why the full APIA is not required. I trust officers' determination that that's the case, and any additional ask, I believe, would take focus of officers away from the work of actually delivering any recovery and improvement plan, reiterating the challenges facing the service as eloquently described by Mrs. J just a moment ago, especially if we know and are of the belief that the result of a full APIA will tell us what is already stated in the report. However, if members are determined for a full APIA to be completed, then that will be the course of action taken forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up now. Councillor Patterson.
Just in response to what Councillor Sinclair said there, I hope that it's not the impression that we don't trust the inclination of officers, but I think what this is pointing out is that we shouldn't have to ask and we shouldn't have to put trust in or faith in that the information should be there at hand. That's not just for this report. I think it's indicative. Quite often we're in meetings and we're having to ask for EPIAs, and I think that is the position of this council that we shouldn't have to ask. They should be present for every report. So it's not that anyone doesn't have trust or faith in officers, it's that this is a piece of work that should be available to councillors at the time when it's needed.
Could I just go to Councillor Sinclair and clarify, are you moving the paper or are you accepting the amendment?
I mean, it's clear that again, more information is required. So in the interest of having that available, then that's fair enough. I'll accept the amendment where that's concerned. And if that's...
Okay. Can I just confirm that wouldn't hold up the progress of the plan being developed? Okay, Councillor Garner as a second, are you happy to accept that?
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Okay, any further questions in relation to the paper itself? Councillor Nimmo.
Convener, just a quick question. I believe this year we're short of music and maths teachers. I'm just wondering if there's any other subjects that we're actually short in teachers, and are we able to offer enough classes in these subjects to cover the demand?
Mrs. J.
Thanks, Convener. Thanks, Councillor Nimmo. When we spoke about this last week together, it's about waiting to see when choices are made and probationary allocations are given where any gaps are in subjects. So certainly maths and music were focus areas for last session into this. We'll know more about that, I would expect, after Christmas time, once people start to make their subject choices and timetables are set. And then when we know our probationer numbers, that's where we can finally identify if we haven't managed to fill any recruitment gaps with probationer posts moving forward. So we don't usually know really where the gaps are in terms of the number of people we have to recruit until possibly March, April time.
Okay, thanks.
But at the moment, nobody's saying anything. At the moment from secondary schools, it's highlighting any particular subject at this time.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, Councillor Steinberg.
Yeah, just two questions on specific examples. I'm going to go to the example of Woodland ELC and the support that they've given to other ELCs in their outdoor learning. I think I've been to visit Woodlands ELC. I think it's a fantastic place. It's also very well positioned for outdoor learning next to the best park in Scotland. So what scope have other ELCs had to sort of learn from Woodlands as referred to in the paper, and how is that improvement work progressing over the short term?
So people are welcome to visit like you did yourself, and they've hosted a series of sessions for other practitioners to go and learn. They're also developing a whole suite of walkthrough kind of digital resources that can be shared out in case people can't go there themselves. And also, as Kinnaird Waters did for their STEM award at our Heads of Establishment meeting on Friday, we also take learning sessions like that where people come along and showcase what they're doing for other people to learn from. So it's a real mixture of going face to see it in practice, some training materials and sharing materials, and also coming to speak about it at bigger events.
Fantastic. I think that's a good example of how we can share that sort of expertise. My next question's on the Digital Learning Consortia, and referred to, I believe courses can be accessed at home based around pupils' preference. Is that true?
We can, where it's all right for children to be at home in senior phase on their own. If they're comfortable with that, then yes, they can. But we also like to make sure that children have the opportunity to study or access these things in their own school. We provide space for them to do that in their own school as well. And we're also now connected. Connected learning means that public libraries are now connected to the Connected Learning Network. So if young people wanted to go and use a public library, they could also use that too.
It's definitely important that they have that choice of space. What forum or opportunity do they have to give feedback on how they're finding digital consortia and what their preference would be going forward?
That's a good question. So we're currently doing a big review of remote learning at the moment. We're benchmarking with other local authorities to see how well people engage with that of the senior phase age group. We're looking to see how successful it is, if there is or is not tutoring and support for study support built into that, so it can't be entirely remote learning. We do want to make sure in Falkirk that young people have the chance to touch base with a member of staff if they're learning online. And we're currently looking to see if we're managing the right breadth of subjects and of course the right courses. You know, there's a lot of advanced higher. Are we tackling the right subjects by remote learning? And we'll then be looking at a further bit of work to see, is it the most efficient model that we have? So we're still trying to keep that. The whole point of remote learning and the consortia is to give our young people the best choice, that nobody's disadvantaged, but you'll understand that comes with logistics. And at the same time, we're trying to look at the efficiency of the timetable and delivery of subjects which have got smaller uptakes and smaller classes. So it's a combination of all of these things.
I absolutely appreciate that that's been recognised in terms of the choice and has been actively pursued as the primary objective. Thanks very much, Rona. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Murphy, do you have other questions?
It was a question specifically on that, on consortia, and I think it's fantastic, especially the digital opportunities. I just wanted to clarify then, so for children who choose to study as a subject through consortia outside their current high school, is that an option for all of them? I mean, I know you're like, ideally then there will always be circumstances where you want to be in face-to-face, but is that an option, particularly if there was travel difficulties for the children, or if they're maybe wanting to do more than one subject in that way? Could they do? Does it open to everybody?
At the moment, it targets young people who want to take a choice that isn't available in their own school. As we sort of further develop connected learning and remote learning to have a Falkirk prospectus, if you like, approach, that's the ambition eventually, that it doesn't matter where you go to school in Falkirk in the senior phase to start with, you'd be able to make choices in subjects you would like to take, as well as ones that are not available to you. You're right to mention the transport. Obviously, there's costs involved with transport, and that's one of the things that we've been tasked to think more efficiently about. And there's also transports different for those who live in central Falkirk, where they're going, as opposed to those who are living in more rural areas of Falkirk. So these things are all sort of part of the package, but the ambition is that in time we're able to offer that choice to everybody, rather than just for those who can't access a subject they want to take that's not available to them.
Okay, I'll pick up specifically with you offline, but it's just whether that clarity that if a child did and was currently accessing, for example, a subject or a series of subjects through consortia physically and travelling, and that was causing difficulty, they could ask whether they could do those digitally online, perhaps maybe even not from home, but in the school in which they are travelling from to, for example, then access. That would be an option open to everyone then.
Well, we would have to make sure that the member of staff who's delivering that particular qualification is live streaming, if you like. So at the moment, if they're doing that face-to-face, that might not be what they're doing. Okay. But if they were going to be accessing a hybrid system where some children were there face-to-face and others weren't, that would have to be planned with that.
But there are possibilities. Well, I'll pick up specifically with you offline, but it's useful to have that out. Thank you. That's my question.
Okay, as there are no further lights indicating wishing to speak, are we happy to agree the report? Agreed. Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of this morning's Education, Children and Young People's Executive. Thank everybody for their attendance, and I'm sure everybody will now be ready for their lunch. Thank you.